Operation Spear enters a second day in Iraq, and U.S. Marines free 4 hostages from a bunker where they were chained and tortured. About 1,000 U.S. and Iraqi forces are fighting insurgents near the Syrian border. 50 anti-government insurgents have been killed and 100 have been captured. The defense called 3 witnesses in the trial of 80-year-old Edgar Ray Killen today. He is the former Ku Klux Klan's member charged with killing 3 civil rights workers 41 years ago. Closing arguments could take place next week. Natalie Holloway's mother is expressing frustration even as police arrest in Aruba a 4th person in connection with the Holloway disappearance. Beth Holloway Twitty says she is losing patience with the pace of the investigation. The 4th person in custody is identified as a 26-year-old party boat DJ. U.S. Secretary of State Condoleezza Rice is out to, quote, re-energize the roadmap during her week-long trip to the Middle East. During a press conference with Palestinian Authority President Mahmoud Abbas today, Rice said Israeli and Palestinian leaders should begin ironing out differences over Israel's planned pullout from Gaza. That's what's happening right now in the news. I'm Carol Lynn. Now to the Capitol Gang.
From Washington, the Capitol Gang.
I'm Al Hunt with the full gang for the final time. Mark Shields, Robert Novak, Cato Byrne, and Margaret Carlson. Democrats stepped up criticism of the war in Iraq with Senator Ted Kennedy again calling for Defense Secretary Donald Rumsfeld to resign.
I think the American people deserve better. They deserve competency and they deserve the facts. In baseball, it's 3 strikes, you're out. What is it for the Secretary of Defense?
No, but I'd be happy to explain.
The commanding general in Iraq was asked whether he agreed with Vice President Dick Cheney that the insurgency is in its last throes.
There's a lot of work to be done against the insurgency.
It doesn't sound to me from your testimony or any other testimony here this morning that it is in its last throes, but
I'm sure you'll forgive me from criticizing the Vice President.
Meanwhile, Republican Senator Robert Bennett met with the president and discussed his embattled Social Security plan.
I will be proposing a bill that does not include personal accounts. And the president's aware of that. He indicated that I should go forward and do that.
Hey, Bob, is President Bush in deep trouble on both Iraq and Social Security?
Well, I think he's in trouble in Iraq. This war goes on. I think one of his great assets is Teddy Kennedy with his nastiness and saying, calling him on to quit. That's just childish. Nobody likes that. But when Dick Cheney says it's in its last throes and General Abbas can't agree with him, that's difficulty. It is a problem. Now, I think they have really mishandled the Social Security question. They should have had a plan out there. And the latest fiasco was Senator Bennett came and says, we're not going to have personal accounts. And the president says to everybody, whether he's listening or not, just go ahead and continue what you're doing. And he doesn't mean he's abandoning personal accounts. They're still trying, but the odds are pretty bad. So I'd say that on those 2 issues, this is not a good time for the president. But there's ups and downs in every presidency, and this is one of the down times.
2 biggest issues around, though, Margaret, aren't they?
Right. And Senator Kennedy isn't the president's concern. It's Republicans and General Abizade and other generals who haven't been as outspoken, who've been in Iraq and who know that it's not a public relations problem, which the White House made it out to be. The president is now going to go around the country selling the Iraq war the way he tried to sell Social Security, and they may both end up the same way. It's not going well, and everyone knows it. And the first step to making it go better is for the president to acknowledge the problem that's there with the insurgency, to armor the troops, to send more troops, and to somehow fix the Iraqi army, which has been infiltrated, and everyone knows it because they have found the fingerprints of Iraqi soldiers on the IEDs along the road.
Do you see any glimmer of light here, Cato Byrne?
Every general who testified this week said they have a really tough job on their hands, but they are seeing progress. Every one of them said that. Even putting aside the typically defeatist attitude on the part of too many liberals, I do think it's so that the public, given the heartbreaking losses we're seeing every week, the public does wonder whether or not a free and democratic Iraq is worth the cost. if they don't see it firmly connected to America's national interest. And that's the case the president has to keep making. John McCain made that case, Rudy Giuliani and the president at the Republican convention. It moved public opinion, but that's the burden of the administration. The public will understand sacrifices are worth it as long as our own national security is seen at issue, and I think that's something the administration hasn't done enough of.
Just a problem of communications, Mark?
I think it's deeper than that, Al. And President Bush is in trouble, and I guess where I dissent from Kate's observation is there have been no calls to sacrifice. The only people sacrificing are those in uniform and their loved ones, and everybody else is just painless, ouchless patriotism, and profitable as well. Al, the very qualities that got George Bush reelected, the sense of strength, and the sense that John Kerry represented risk, both to the culture of the country and internationally to the war on terrorism. Right now, George Bush has come to represent risk. His Social Security plan is seen as too risky. The Iraq war plan is altogether risky, and Americans are really questioning deeply and profoundly. This is an anti-war movement with no leadership. There's no MoveOn.org. There's no Ben Spock or George McGovern at the head of it. This is coming right up from the grassroots, which has to make the president.
Let me just say one thing, Bob, and I want you to pick up on it, because you have reported several times, and I think quite accurately, that there was a strong sentiment within parts of this administration to begin an orderly withdrawal. It seems to me now that that is an option, that their option is either to do that, at which point I think Iraq may well go into chaos, or not to do that, at which point you're going to have more and more Republicans like Walter Jones say, wait a minute, you have real problems. Am I exaggerating that dilemma?
I think I would not use the word go into chaos. I believe it's going to be very difficult for them. The Iraqis have, as an artificial country, they have a lot of difficulties, and it's not our responsibility. I don't believe that is the win or lose thing in the war against terrorism. I'd like to make two points, though. And Mark, I think this country is built on risk. You take a risk in your life when you went into journalism at an advanced age, and you've been very successful, and you risk paid off. The risk Americans are risk prone, not risk averse, and I hope they still are. And secondly, what bothers me, I'm not an enthusiast of this war, but I sure as hell hope they do well. I just get a feeling from a lot of Democrats and a lot of liberals that they are rejoicing that they think this is a quagmire. They think it's a political advantage.
Is that what's happening, Margaret?
That is so untrue. I think during the campaign there was some, look at how Iraq is going, let's change leadership. But that is gone. No one is rejoicing because there's no alternative to winning. I think it will be utter chaos. We went to war on a theory, and now of democratizing a place. Mark, by the way, put his profession at risk. He didn't put other people's lives at risk.
There is an alternative to winning, unfortunately. We could lose the will and therefore lose. Our commitment isn't by any means endless, but this president has resolved, and I think when he continues to remind the American public about our own national security interests, to do everything in our power. Ultimately, it is up to the Iraqis, but we will not cut and run too soon.
Final Iraq thought, Mark.
I know Bob was not referring to anybody on this panel. I know him too well for that. But I would quote to him the General Anthony Zinni, the former four-star Marine general, who said, this is like the Chateau generals of World War II who continued to send their own troops out to be slaughtered because of a political mistake. That you don't pay, the politicians don't pay for the mistake, the troops pay for it in blood.
Coming up next on Capitol Gang, old-fashioned Chicago political arm twisting brings a Dick Durbin apology.
CNN Tonight, Jermaine Jackson on his brother Michael's acquittal of child molestation.
Michael is not a weird person. Michael is not, this is just a bunch of talk calling him Wacko Jackal.
Larry King Live, CNN Tonight, 9 Eastern.
You email in real time. You download at broadband speeds. Even catch breaking updates. Only Verizon Wireless has the latest all-in-one devices with wireless sync on a network you trust. Nothing slows you down. Save $100 on the SV6600 and get on the nation's largest and fastest wide-area wireless broadband network. Verizon Wireless. We never stop working for you.
Remember the moment The skies over Baghdad have been illuminated.
Remember how you felt.
This is the moment that we've been waiting for.
Remember where you were.
The smoke billowing out of the Trade Center.
For 25 years, as the world changed, you saw it on CNN. See your world live as it happens. See it on CNN.
Welcome back. Senate Democratic Whip Richard Durbin backed away from his remarks comparing the Guantanamo detention facility with genocidal regimes of the past after Chicago Mayor Richard Daley called his comments a disgrace.
I'm sorry if anything that I said caused any offense or pain to those who have such bitter memories of the Holocaust. I offer my apologies to those who were offended by my words.
Democrats demanded presidential advisor Karl Rove's apology after he made these comments at a New York political gathering.
Conservatives saw the savagery of 9/11 and the attacks and prepared for war. Liberals saw the savagery of the 9/11 attacks and wanted to prepare indictments and offer therapy and understanding to our attackers.
Meanwhile, Senate Democrats again refused to permit the nomination of John Bolton as U.S. ambassador to the UN to come to a vote.
They send us this flawed candidate because of this ideological bent the White House has. We want a nominee that the American people can be proud of. Bolton isn't anyone we can be proud of.
Mark, are Democrats riding high or preparing for a fall?
Actually, both, Al. The reality is, with only two political parties, if one of the two that's in power has formed the political equivalent of the circular firing squad, which is what the Republicans have done, taken their own numbers way the hell down, then the Democrats will be the beneficiary at the polls. But the Democrats have to come up, and they ought to learn from the Republicans. They have to come up with an agenda for governing and an idea about where they want to lead the country. As far as Karl Rove is concerned, Al, he makes Spiro Agnew look like Winston Churchill. This is a desperate man who sees his whole new political era crumbling about him.
Kate?
What Karl Rove said about liberals is absolutely true. Look at what Move On was saying on September 13th, 2 days after 9/11. Let's show restraint and moderation. Michael Moore. Michael Moore is not who blames America for the 9/11 attacks. He's been embraced by the Democratic Party. He was a star at their convention. Move On is not some estranged group. They spent millions to elect John Kerry, and Hillary Clinton and Harry Reid and Robert Byrd, and all go to Move On's rallies. It is true about some liberals. It's not a fight or discussion I don't think Democrats want to have because the public recognizes that too many liberals are of a blame America mindset and are defeatist about the war on terror.
Margaret, I don't recall Michael Moore being a hero at the Democratic Convention. He snuck into a box one time and sitting next to Jimmy Carter without the president knowing.
Tried to shun him, in fact. Karl Rove was talking about Democrats. He's not talking about liberals. He's talking about liberal Democrats. And he meant it to be the party that backed all of the officials, as far as I know, in the elected officials in the Democratic Party stood behind the president after 9/11. I don't know any of them who suggested therapy. I don't know any of them who suggested that we indict Osama bin Laden. And so I don't know where that comes from. You know what's interesting? I don't believe he did.
He said we shouldn't prejudge him.
You know what?
He needs a trial.
I'll tell you, Howard Dean said something very interesting during the campaign, and he was chased out because of it, which is he didn't think we were safer because Saddam Hussein had been deposed. And by the way, we aren't. Politicians are punished for foresight.
Bob, punished for foresight?
Let me talk about the Karl Rove thing. I think is not the kind of politics that is very effective. I think he becomes the issue instead of the Democrats. But I sympathize with him. The Democrats have been so nasty. Harry Reid used to be one of the nicest little guys you'd want, and now he's just he's a dirty mouth. The idea of they're having at least he speaks the truth in the sense that all this charade is holding up the Bolton nomination because they wouldn't allow some documents to come out. He says, no, we just can't stand Bolton. He doesn't know anything about Bolton, and he's attacking him. Now, I got to say one thing about Dick Durbin, who didn't make a move didn't make a move toward an apology until Mayor Daley said he was a disgrace. He was a disgrace. The mayor of Chicago said that about an Illinois Democrat. But I did not consider that an apology.
Well, let's wait for somebody.
I read that carefully. That was not an apology. He said, if somebody misinterpreted me, if somebody was offended, I'm sorry. Very, very and people in the press said, oh, he apologized.
I'm going to get in here for a minute on Bolton because Trent Lott and John McCain and Mitch McConnell and others have all said to the White House, release this information, call their bluff, see what they'll do. It's Dick Cheney who's insisting they won't do that. If they continue to insist they're not going to release that, the Bolton nomination is dead. I'll go further. I'll give you a possible replacement. Newt Gingrich, who is lobbying for the job, and can you imagine Newt Gingrich as UN ambassador, and it saddens me because if Newt Gingrich makes a comeback and I'm not here to chronicle it and write about it, that really is unfair.
Out. By the way, little Harry Reid is about your size, I think, Bob. And,
I'm little.
And let's wait for somebody to call Karl Rove a disgrace for what he said.
Right.
George W. Bush has piously spoken about the need to change the climate in Washington. Let's hear what George W. Bush has to say about the savagery of Bob Novak's defended remarks Karl Rove made. I mean, those were beyond anything in politics.
It's true of some liberals.
The
record shows it's true of some liberals.
You defended.
Who was the savage?
His savagery, which you defended. You said, I wouldn't have said it, but I can understand.
Karl Rove's savagery.
Yeah,
I think I said, you have for 17 years, Mark, sat there misrepresenting things I say, and I said I didn't think that was the right thing to say.
You said it wasn't smart, but you could understand.
No, I didn't say it. Wait a minute. Just a minute. No. I didn't say it wasn't smart. I said he shouldn't have done that. I think that's the wrong thing to do, but I can understand
Margaret,
it.
a final word.
But I don't understand it.
Right.
And
you don't understand anything.
And, I think everybody should lower the rhetoric, but I don't see why you choose Dick Durbin to criticize and kind of like
Because that was an outrage.
Thank you, Margaret. Yeah. Next on Capital Gang, are lobbyists out of control in Washington? Unlike
CNN July 3rd. Remember the birth of the internet? Corporate mega mergers. The first 401k? CNN's Ali Velshi reveals the top 25 business stories. A CNN 25 special, July 3rd, 8 p.m. Eastern.
When it's 10 o'clock, trust Newsnight with Aaron Brown. It's the only network newscast at 10 o'clock. Newsnight with Aaron Brown. CNN Monday.
American Morning, where real news makes the difference. CNN Monday starts 7 a.m. Eastern.
From executive producer Steven Spielberg and DreamWorks Television, a 6-week television event into the West. 3 chances to watch every weekend. See it tomorrow at 8, only on TNT.
Welcome back. The Senate Indian Affairs Committee heard testimony that Republican lobbyist Jack Abramoff illicitly took millions of dollars from the Choctaw Indian tribe.
Today's hearing is about more than contempt, even more than greed. It's simply and sadly a tale of betrayal.
Chairman John McCain questioned a former Abramoff aide who dealt with Indian tribes.
You were the tribe's client manager. You were aware, weren't you, of Mr. Abramoff billing the tribe for fees and expenses unrelated to the services?
Mr. Chairman, I respectfully decline to answer the question on the basis of my constitutional right.
Kate, does this scandal threaten to spread from one lobbyist to the GOP in general?
I think the Abramoff dealings with misdealings with these Indian tribe clients is a level of greed this town hasn't seen before. I think it transcends party, it transcends conscience. He is being investigated by a Republican committee chairman. He's being investigated by a Republican Justice Department. I think it's sui generis with respect to him and a few of his cohorts. What I do think Republicans have to answer for is another story this week about the number of lobbyists here in town increasing so dramatically on their watch. It used to be, it seems to me, they were sort of evenly divided between those lobbyists representing interests who wanted Washington to leave them alone and those looking to get a piece of the pie. With the pie growing so much under a Republican Congress, there seem to be more lobbyists representing interests who want a piece of that bigger pie.
What they used to say about the Democrats 10 years ago.
That's right, Al. And I'd say Kate mentioned a few of his cohorts. Those cohorts deserve a little attention, a little celebrity. Ralph Reed, the angelic-faced character assassin of the South Carolina primary against John McCain, took millions of dollars, didn't actually know what was going on. Grover Norquist, the favorite tax cutter of all those in Washington. What's the story with Grover? Hundreds of thousands of dollars to arrange meetings at the White House. The White House is now part of this, and the president's got to distance himself from it. Al, this is corrupt. It is going. It's going to continue, and it is truly, truly real.
Corrupt, Bob?
Yes. This is a corrupt town. There was a lot of corruption in the Clinton administration. A lot of people said it was Bill Clinton. A lot of people, there's corruption involved in this, and they say it's George W. Bush. It isn't. What it is, it's big government. It is when government gets this big and people have great advantages to get from government, what government favors, what's sanctioning, you find this kind of outrage and pilfering of funds. And as long as you liberals want to have big government and taking care of all of you, you're going to have corruption. Corruption and government go hand in hand. They can't be separated.
Margaret? The number of lobbyists has doubled since Clinton, and the big spending and the big government have happened under Bush, so that there's more money.
True.
There's more money. It's way too true. I don't know how conservatives can stand it. And by the way, it's John McCain who's holding hearings. It's no ethics committee. They're dead. They're not looking at each other.
As you wrote this
Only
week.
Senator McCain is out there doing it.
I'm going to pick up on what Mark said, because I must say I was just shocked to read some of this stuff. Grover Norquist, I thought it was all about principle. Grover, we find out now, is all about greed. Ralph Reed, the evangelical Christian, devout Christian, writes an email in which he says, now that I'm done with electoral politics, I need to start humping in corporate accounts. Bob, what do we tell the children? I mean, I'm shocked.
Well, I know you're not shocked, because we have to, on our last show, have to be a little honest. You're delighted. You're not shocked. You love it, because anybody who is against high taxes, and you can pin on any mispractice, you love. So you and Mark, you're just dancing a jig around this table. Oh boy. So don't give me that cynical thing about how you're shocked. You're delighted. Admit it.
Kate, I'm really shocked, but Kate, you can tell me why I shouldn't be shocked.
When it comes to Ralph Reed, when I read very closely what exactly it is he apparently is being accused of, I'm not sure that there's a there. And I do think we have to be careful in this respect. People have a right to earn money. Talented people make a lot of it, and a lot of people on both sides of the aisle have gotten very rich working in this town.
Well, yeah, Mark, if hypocrisy were a felony, Al, these people would be looking at 30 years hard time. They came and presented themselves as one thing, which they weren't. Ralph Reed was supposedly interested in prayer in the schools and cleaning up television and all the rest of it. He's down there actually organizing a grassroots
And we're
campaign.
finding that what he's doing is, quote, humping in corporate accounts. Whatever that means, Margaret. Coming up in the second half of the Capital Gang, a look back at some of the best Capital Gang moments.
Welcome to the original Capital Gang. I'm Pat Buchanan with Al Hunt, Robert Novak, and Mark Shields. Until the fall of 1991, I served as our moderator when I lost my amateur standing by going into New Hampshire. Brother Novak, what were the great issues that sort of divided the panel and in those years, especially back there in 90 and 91?
Well, the biggest event during your reign as moderator was the U.S. invasion of Iraq, the first time to restore Kuwaiti rule. And what was very interesting is we had a 3-to-1 split against the war. The only guy for the war was General Hunt over there, and he called me Neville Novak.
When it comes to our national interest, Bob, you become a Neville Chamberlain, appease at any cost. Well, Neville Novak, let me tell you something. Let me just tell you something.
Mark was against it, and you were against it, and as usual, the powers that be didn't take our advice.
Well, it was because that thing took 6 or 8 months or something like that, Al. I mean, from the time the invasion came until the U.S. war came, so it was every single week we had to deal with this thing.
We did. It began actually in August, I think, and then we went through, March, and talked about it a lot. But the other thing I remember, Pat, is being on with you two, the two icons of the conservative movement in Washington. And this was before Novak was a Catholic, of course. So basically what Novak cared about were tax cuts. And what you cared about were the movement, conservative issues. You put up with tax cuts. You didn't really care much about them. At that time, he didn't really care that much about the social issues. And sometimes he would go on one of his rants about how we should deny turkeys to poor people at Thanksgiving. And you would get this horrified look on your face like, is this my ally?
Just to defend myself, I didn't. That was when you were moderator. First Thanksgiving, I didn't say we should deny turkey. I said, and I still believe this, that people are enjoying the Thanksgiving. They don't want to see poor people on the TV set. And that's all I said.
He still looks horrified.
Do they want to see poor people cluttering up the TV set around Christmas and Thanksgiving?
I think
Novak had a point.
I think Tuesday to Thursday in February is the only time we ought to be aware that there are people in this country who aren't worried about cutting their capital gains tax. Now, Al's absolutely right. This was before Bob was concerned about cutting the capital gains tax as well as all tax cuts, and founded at that point, you recall, the Robert D. Novak Home for the victims of capital gains tax, one of his favorite charities. But I do remember our disagreements passionately on the show. But I remember one remarkable moment when I was going through the airport in Denver, Colorado, and a woman came up to me and grabbed me and said, Mr. Shields, I watch the Capital Gang, and I agree with you on everything except late-term abortion. But I have to tell you one thing that really bothers me. You people like each other. And this was really true, because this is before Washington became as ugly and polarized and rancid a place.
I have to say my most memorable moments when Brother Novak turned to you and said the Democratic Party is completely controlled by gays, and I'm sitting right here, and you say, BS, in a loud, pungent voice. And then so I looked at you and tried to follow up, and then you said it right to me, and all I remember is looking at the camera and saying, we'll be right back. Figuring out how who's going to have to leave this show.
And you broke out laughing while you were going. It's the only time I ever saw you lose it for a moment, Pat. I want to pick up on what Mark said for a minute, because I had known Bob quite well. I had dealt with you professionally before we did the show. And I have to tell you, I thought in the beginning the idea of having this right-wing Pat Buchanan as the moderator was not the most appealing prospect in the world. And I told my wife after about the third or fourth show, I said, something terrible's happened. She said, what is it? I said, I really like Pat Buchanan. He's really a great colleague. She said, you'll get over it, but I never did.
Well, listen, Novak was the one that appointed me to this when he figured he wasn't getting enough speaking time in the moderator chair.
I tell you, as you get older, you tell the truth, and as things wind down. I was on the McLaughlin group. I was one of the originals on the McLaughlin group, as you were. And I decided I couldn't stand John McLaughlin anymore, being with him, frankly. And so, but I like this kind of show. Right. So I decided CNN wanted to do this kind of thing. So I made the suggestion of you three, with a lot of thought given to gender and racial diversity. And I suggested that you'd be. I had seen you moderate sometimes at CNN when you were in the old days, and I thought you could. You weren't always the extreme advocate.
And Pat, when you left, of course, you left to. It was really interesting because Pat left to challenge President Bush's renomination in '92, and I remember being up in New Hampshire with you. And I mean, we talk about a total role reversal. I mean, and Pat, I think Pat, it was a remarkable experience for you. You were radicalized in that campaign.
Oh yeah, listen, you see all those working guys up there. That's when I left Novak and the Free Traders and came out to America First, America Jobs First.
You know what it is? That is a good lesson that guys who are on talk shows shouldn't run for president.
I disagree.
I am very, very confident that'll never happen to your colleague here over here, Mr. Novak, Pat.
Yep. Well, it was it was a great group. In those 4 years, it's been great since. You guys had a great show, and proud to have been a part of it.
And a big part you've been.
As Kate and Margaret said, we don't look a bit different. Coming up next, the most contentious Capitol gang ever. Bill Bennett puts on his virtues hats when there's not a political election, and then he puts on his partisan hat when we have an election, Bill. You got your talking points from Austin on this.
I don't.
I mean, basically, for you to talk about Mark being ad hominem, when you talk about Al Gore stealing, Al Gore's the thug. I'm sorry. Wait a minute, Bob. I'm going to finish.
No, I'm going to finish. I am
going to finish,
defend
Bob.
myself.
CNN Tuesday, Nancy Grace, Mark Aragos,
wait until jury selection.
the rematch.
Yes, I do have a problem with that.
You agreed with me a few nights ago.
Larry King Live, CNN Tuesday, 9 Eastern.
Welcome back. We have welcomed many guests into Studio C over the years. Perhaps the most memorable was Republican William J. Bennett on November 18th, 2000, in the midst of the presidential election recount.
This may be the worst thing I've ever seen. Al Gore is trying to steal this election. I know you guys don't like Bush. I know you don't want Republicans to win. But you have got to call these thug tactics. No, I mean, you can laugh about it. If you don't call the kind of thuggish tactics that the Gore campaign is using now for what they are, you know, the notion of objectivity in the media is gone.
Bill, I just cannot disagree with you more strenuously. The first place, Al Gore, as of we sit here, leads in the nation, popular vote. Al Gore has more electoral votes than George W. Bush. You can sit there from your Olympian perch and talk and issue your moral thunderbolts. But the fact of the matter is, you and I vote in the same precinct. Do you think those people there, Bill, do you think they're corrupt? Is that what you think they are? Do you think
do you
they're
want me to
corrupt?
answer? Your arguments are ad hominem.
But they're not ad hominem.
Yeah, they are ad hominem. Yeah,
what were you talking about? Al Gore trying to steal an election?
To attack me being Olympian? Absolutely, based on the evidence and based on the facts. The issue isn't the popular vote, Mark. I mean, maybe it sounds Olympian to you. The issue is electoral votes.
Bill Bennett puts on his virtues hats when there's not a political election, and then he puts on his partisan hat when we have an election, Bill. You got your talking points from Austin on this.
I don't.
I mean, I'm going to finish. I'm going to finish. I am going to finish,
I can defend
Bob.
myself. Where's the character assassination on the part of the Bush campaign? Where's the character assassination?
Stealing the election of
Where's
thugs.
the assassination?
Thugs
Where's the
stealing the election. If that's not character assassination,
Who's personally been attacked?
Bob, who caused this unpleasantness that you so objected to?
You and Mark did. There's no question about it. Bennett came in here strongly because there was obviously that George W. won this election on the electoral votes, and the Gore people were trying to steal it. And he said this, and you guys attacked him, which is it was ad hominem, but it was pretty good television. It was uncomfortable at the time. Bennett never came on the show again, and I don't blame him.
You were there that night, Margaret?
Yeah, apparently I stayed out of it, or Bob just cut me out, as he is wont to do. You know, we had the wrong Bennett on. Bob Bennett would never behave that way. But the most interesting part for me, listening to it, is where Bob says, "Let's not insult people." I would like to.
Did you?
No, I
can
didn't.
Myself.
I can defend myself. Yeah.
I wasn't there. I'm not so sure. I'm sorry I wasn't there. It is a reminder when you look back how strong the feelings were during that Florida recount, and I think we saw in that clip the stakes were huge, and Al Gore was cherry picking.
Kate O'Byrne is right. The feelings were intense, and that was an example of it. But let's be very blunt about it. What the Gore people were asking for was a recount. That's all. That's not thuggish tactics. The Bush people went to court to stop the recount at the time that was most propitious for them. We listened to that Rodney King excerpt of "Let's not insult people. Can't we all get along?" I mean, when Novak becomes the peacemaker, then you really know you got a hot show going.
Well, you know, after that show, the young staff members and interns said that before the show, that Bill Bennett had tried to bully them. He came itching for a fight for some inexplicable reason. Really? And you know what, Mark? He got it. Next on Capital Gang, we'll take a look back at the many guests that have joined us over the past 17 years.
Together for the first time ever, John Mellencamp and John Fogerty. I was born in a small town. Two incredible artists, John Mellencamp. One incredible night, John Fogerty. Saturdays September 3rd, Mandalay Bay Event Center. Get your tickets on sale right now through Ticketmaster, the Mandalay Bay box office, by phone or online. Presented by VH1 and VH1 Classic.
Welcome back. Over the past 17 years, the Capitol Gang has hosted cabinet members, senators, House speakers, and presidential advisors to address the biggest stories of the day. Let's take a look back at just a few.
The Soviet Union is the one nation in the world that still possesses the capacity to destroy us. The fact of the matter is they still retain enormous military potential, and we don't know what the political future holds for the Soviet Union.
I think when this firepower turns on the ground echelons, and we're close to that point, we're going to see some very major traumas for the Iraqi forces.
Right now, to have gone to Baghdad, taken responsibility for the Iraqi government, set up a post-World War II type occupation for years, been responsible for bringing the country back to economic restoration, being responsible for picking political successors, running the country, would have been a mistake. We don't need to do that, and the president was right not to.
I thought we might get 16 votes. To get above 40 votes sent a very substantial message to the United States military that the culture has to change and that boys will be boys is no longer acceptable.
Paula Jones is not going to succeed with this suit. It's a frivolous suit. But more importantly, if you go to the office of the president, if this goes forward, it'll just be an invitation to nuisance suits of all sorts.
Seems to me there is a point here where, as a citizen, you don't care about either party. You just want to, it worries you to see the political system involved in this kind of a scandal.
The Democrat Party just has not gotten the message, can't read it, can't understand it. They're in total disarray. They're fighting amongst themselves as to what direction they should go.
We had a choice between the biggest spending reduction, the Republican plan in history, and the biggest tax increase in the world in history, according to Senator Moynihan, in the world, and that the Democrats voted for the big tax increase.
Bigger than the Reagan tax increase?
Oh, yes.
Bob is simply being nostalgic. He wants these tax cuts so we'll get another deficit so we can have a balanced budget campaign again. Just like an old days.
This will be a close election between the Republican and the Democrat. And Hillary Clinton will not run as well as those early polls. Yeah, and she has time and I have time to make a decision.
My hope and prayer is that there's enough interest and outrage and concern amongst the American people that a fair and balanced campaign finance reform bill will pass.
I'm so surprised that anyone would even suggest that Americans want their Social Security system changed to think about individual investment accounts. They're risky, they're expensive to administer, far more expensive than the current Social Security system.
I heard Rumsfeld and Powell in a long briefing with the Senate. They were mighty close together. Clearly, Osama bin Laden, the camps, the Taliban are probable targets, probably military action there.
You just have to go to downtown Manhattan to see what the terrorists have done. We have to respond to terrorism, or we're just going to constantly be attacked again and again and again.
Mark, the most memorable guest.
Al, general rule, cabinet officers are worse than senators. Senators are worse than House members. House members are better than they are. I would put in that category Tom Davis, the Republican from Virginia, Barney Frank, Democrat from Massachusetts, Vic Fazio, the former California governor, and Vin Weber, the former Congressman, and Vin Weber, the former Republican from
Cato
Minnesota.
Byrne.
Well, we poor conservatives on this show are outnumbered 3-2 on every show. So I invariably would be on with Democrats. And no matter how partisan or sort of ugly and contentious things were on the Hill, Saturday night after Saturday night, we would have very cordial, friendly conversations with some of my favorites, Chris Dodd in Edmondale, John Podesta, the late Bob Matsui, the late Paul Wellstone. Gentlemen, every one of them. And I think maybe we showed in some small way you can disagree without being disagreeable.
Aren't you impressed by that, Bob?
I was very impressed. I thought the worst guests over the years have been White House staffers because they are in such a short leash.
Yeah.
Both parties, and terrified that we really haven't put too many of them on. I want to say a word. The guest, and he was a terrific guest on our first pilot, which never got on the air, was Bob Strauss, and he was then a guest on many shows in the future. I thought he was a terrific guest.
He was a terrific guest.
Margaret Carlson?
I'd put him on my list too, Bob Strauss. I love the people who love what they do, who come on the show, and you can just see it in them. And that would be, Chris Dodd is one of those people, Ed Rendell.
Any Republicans?
John McCain.
Knew it. I knew it.
My kind of Republican.
I repeat, any Republican?
I don't think he loves. I don't think he loves what he does. Oh no! I think he loves power. He doesn't love governing. And I'll have to say, Mayor Mike Bloomberg, and a sometime employer of mine, I must admit.
Well, picking up on Margaret Carlson, I would certainly agree with her on Mike Bloomberg, and I never went out with him, Margaret. Of the others, I would say Chris Dodd and Charlie Rangel and Peter King of the House. He was good, and Daniel Patrick Moynihan was always great. The gang will be back with our all-time outrages of the last 17 years. Last week, I said the Bush administration bought oil and gas property in Florida from a rich contributor. The sale never went through, only because Congress never approved it. And now for the outrages of the last 17 years. I'm all for rising tides that lift all the boats. But today, the top 1% of Americans make about $700,000 after taxes. That's double what it was when we began this program. The poorest 20%, meanwhile, bring home only about 15 grand. Little change from 17 years ago. It's not good for any of us, even Bob, when the gap between rich and poor widens. Let's lift all boats, not just yachts.
Thanks, Carl. The record of the U.S. Supreme Court over the past 17 years is surprising and reprehensible. No matter that all but two of the justices were nominated by Republican presidents, they still find invisible writing in the Constitution to justify legislating their social views from the bench. They continue to claim constitutional prohibitions against barring abortion and permitting school prayer. The justices discovered constitutional protection for gay rights and constitutional prohibition of congressional term limits. What can be done? Put more Scalias and more Clarence Thomases on the Supreme Court.
Well, it's a tough call. Dad's Supreme Court delivering the 2000 election, limiting stem cell research. No, it's Bush and Cheney swearing Saddam had weapons of mass destruction and Saddam was linked to al-Qaeda so that they could try out their theory of spreading democracy by force. 1,700 men and women have died in this experiment, sent to Iraq without a plan, in too few numbers, and unarmored. The lies continue, including the one about the insurgency being in its last throes and Iraqis taking over. I know why Bush doesn't meet the dead at Dover. It might pierce his denial or break his heart.
Kate.
You might not appreciate the unrelenting challenge of this ever-popular segment. Some weeks I've been brimming with outrages come airtime. Which to pick? Some weeks I've been utterly sanguine, not a concern in the world, outrageless. I might turn to friends for help. Someone would suggest, how about that tornado? Acts of God are not outrages. A team loss, oh please. Bob, of course, was never short of outrages, but wouldn't share. Natch. What upsets Mark, Al, and Margaret is music to my ears. It's been sort of lonely.
Mark.
Al, Saddam Hussein did not have chemical, biological, or nuclear weapons. He had absolutely no connection to the September 11th attacks on the U.S. Saddam's forces constituted no realistic military threat to his neighbors, let alone to the United States. The case President George W. Bush made for leading his nation into war, now in its third year, with criminally inadequate post-war planning and with tragic costs in blood and treasure, was totally counterfeit and indefensible. It is more than an outrage. It is negligence of truly historical dimensions.
Thanks for joining us.
I love 25 to 50. Yeah, the bonnie boat was one as we sail into the mystic. Oh, when I hear the sailors cry, smell the sea and feel the sky. Let your soul and spirit fly.
Welcome to the Capital Gang.